Swift has made several songs regarding the public's perception of her and her relationships, but one of the most particularly interesting ones is How Did It End? Because while Taylor does use the same metaphor of death in You're Losing Me, How Did It End is not strictly about the process of losing somebody. It's about how people respond to you losing somebody. And the way she uses different perspectives to go about commentating on that in this song is particularly impressive. The opening lyric, "We hereby conduct this postmortem," is a declaration. A postmortem, also known as an autopsy, is performed on a body after a death to determine the cause of death, which is exactly what the rest of the song talks about. Not necessarily the postmortem itself, but the doing of the examination and postmortem. "He was a hothouse flower to my outdoorsman." Hothouse is kind of like a greenhouse. It's made of glass. It stores plants inside for them to grow. Outdoorsmen are obviously people who spend a lot of time outside. He's saying that there is a relationship between who he was and who she was, using the common thread of nature in this specific metaphor. But because a hothouse flower is meant to be indoors and she was an outdoorsman, there is enough room for them to be different as well. "Our maladies were such we could not cure them, and so a touch that was my birthright became foreign." All that really says is, we had our issues, I thought we were going to be together forever, and it didn't work out. In verse 1, Taylor is telling her perspective, but it's also kind of told in the viewpoint of third person. Meaning, you can view this as the examiner conducting the postmortem, explaining what they're observing on the body. Rather than making it third person and using pronouns like she, her, uses first person pronoun my. However, when we get to the chorus, Taylor begins with an Old English idiom, "come one, come all." We used to hear this phrase a lot more like on the news, or there was a big event going on like a circus. "Come one, come all, it's happening again. The empathetic hunger descends. We'll tell no one except all of our friends. We must know, how did it end?" The empathetic hunger descends is basically saying that people can't really control themselves when there's something to gossip about. They're pretending to care for you when all they really want to know is what actually happened. "We'll tell no one except all of our friends. We must know, how did it end?" is complete sarcasm. It's commentary on how people tend not to actually care about somebody who's experiencing loss. They just want the gossip. Which she's not exactly wrong for saying. I mean, think about how many videos you've watched or read through comment sections of people saying XYZ song is specifically about XYZ person when none of us actually know her. This entire chorus is not Taylor's thoughts. This is her taking on the perspective of other characters in the story. "Come one, come all, it's happening again" is the perspective of somebody delivering the gossip. "The empathetic hunger descends" is a description from the narrator. "We'll tell no one except all of our friends. We must know, how did it end" is told from the perspective of somebody receiving the gossip. He then goes on to verse 2. "We were blind to unforeseen circumstances. We learned the right steps to different dances," which is the same type of metaphor with the hothouse flower and outdoorsman. In this metaphor, the common thread is dancing, but they're different dances, so again, there's room for us to be different. Meaning, essentially, we were together, and now we're not. "And fell victim to interlopers' glances." An interloper is another word for somebody who gets involved in a place or situation that they don't belong, or they're not wanted. While I usually think about these guys when I hear the word interlopers, I don't think Taylor Swift is making a Zelda Twilight Princess reference. She's again saying the news of our relationship breaking up has gotten out, and now people are getting involved where they don't belong. In other words, eyes on your own paper. And they'll go home to their husbands, smug because they know they can trust him, then feverishly calling their cousins. This is commentary on people spreading the news, which she reinforces with, "Guess who we ran into at the shops, walking in circles like she was lost. Didn't you hear they called it all off? One gasp, and then how did it end?" Everything in this chorus, except that last line, is an indirect quotation of people spreading the news about a breakup, and it's delivered like she's a zoo animal. "Guess who we ran into at the shops, walking in circles like she was lost." They're supposed to be empathetic, and there's no empathy in describing a person like that who is experiencing loss. One gasp, and then, how did it end? They're not caring about her being hurt. They want to know, how did it end? Which is why this version, especially of the title lyric, reinforces what was just said. Now, the thing that Taylor does really cool in this bridge is, in order to emphasize her entire thesis statement, she actually goes back in time in order to tell more of the story. "Say it once again with feeling" is pushing back on that lack of empathy, because the following lyrics are exactly what she was experiencing while everyone was so focused on how did it end. "How the death rattle breathing silenced as the soul was leaving, the deflation of our dreaming, leaving me bereft and reeling, my beloved ghost and me sitting in a tree, dying." Death rattle is a very distinctive sound that comes from a person as they are dying. We're gonna get a little dark here because it's part of the point of the song. In many cases, it can be the last sound a person makes before they are pronounced dead. While the death rattle breathing silenced as the soul was leaving, meaning the process of dying, or in this case, the metaphor for the process of losing someone, the deflation of our dreaming, the future, we thought we were going to be together forever. The lyric, leaving me bereft and reeling, is very important. Bereft means deprived or lacking something. Reeling can mean like lurching violently or just uncontrollable movements, which is also common for a body to do as it is passing away. My beloved ghost can be interpreted a couple ways. It can mean Taylor's metaphorical soul in this context, or it can mean, as I think is most likely in this context, beloved ghost is the idolized version of who you were with, the person that you knew in the relationship before it ended. My beloved ghost in me sitting in a tree, D-Y-I-N-G. Not only is she losing herself, but also the relationship that she knew. Part of her is dying, and that part of her is the person that she loved. That's why it's an incredible metaphor, because it works both ways, whether you interpret it as her own soul or her idolized partner's soul, meaning all of her hopes and dreams and future with that person. The reason she spells out D-Y-I-N-G is because she's placing an emphasis on the hurt as opposed to what happened. That whole last bridge is essentially saying, stop being focused on how something ends and maybe actually have empathy for a person who is in pain. It's a plea, but she knows it can't be heard because the postmortem is already being conducted. In the rest of the song, she only adds 2 new lines. I can't pretend like I understand, but I still don't know, how did it end? She's saying that while everyone is so convinced that it's ended and this is the reason why, meanwhile, she has no idea. So how on earth could you possibly know? Which is why in my deep dives of her, I always point out this is Taylor as the protagonist and not Taylor as the person, because I don't know Taylor. That's what she's saying in this song. How can people be so convinced with how something ended if the person who it actually affected has no idea themselves? Which is also why in the Fortnite music video, there's an allusion to her being on an examination table. She's just there getting examined. It doesn't matter what she says because people are gonna do it anyway. How Did It End is brilliantly written, because while it plays out like a nice little nursery rhyme with that repeating piano, it's actually Taylor at her most vulnerable and powerless feeling. She takes you into the very specific final metaphorical moment of a death, simultaneously realizes that no one cares that a person is dying, they're just going to care about how she's dying. And that makes this song so brilliant and so sad.